Neal Brown may just coach C.J. Donaldson again in 2025, despite Donaldson transferring away from the West Virginia program, because Neal Brown may land as the offensive coordinator at the Ohio State University. In this live show of Couz's Corner, we're going to talk about that, among other things. And this show is brought to you by Katz, Counter, Stonestreet, and Buckner Attorneys at Law and BetUS Online. And we're going to have that conversation about that. We're also going to talk about Rich Rod appearing on Three Guys Before the Game, my thoughts on his interview. We're going to talk about Big 12 expansion. Was it a mistake to add the four corner schools? I've got some very interesting information on that. And it's not on the list on the side of the screen, but we are also going to talk about the Big 12 releasing their football schedule, and they're doing it in a big way. And we're going to talk about that too in this episode. So thank you all for tuning in. Welcome to this live edition of Couz's Corner. If you're not watching this live, doesn't matter. Still make yourself at home, kick back, relax, and let me pour you out this shot of top shelf college football news and analysis. Thank you all for joining the show. Whether you're live or watching it on the replay, please hit the thumbs up button. It really helps the channel, helps the YouTube algorithm, and helps my channel grow. Let's go ahead and give a few shout outs, and then we'll get into the content. It's Not Okay Golf, Jacob Yoho. It's Kenny Evans, who's a VIP member. Daniel Gigax, also a VIP member, Bob Swanger, and Doris Workman. Thank you all for joining the show. Doris, thank you. I actually just met someone at a Cracker Barrel restaurant that's also from Mingo County. But anyway, and I'm in another state, by the way. But anyway, let's get into the content. All right. First topic we're going to talk about, again, not on the list, but we're going to just touch on this briefly. The Big 12 has announced they're going to be releasing their 2025 college football schedule, conference schedule, that is, on Tuesday, February the 4th at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Central. Now, Big 12 fans and media have been a little frustrated because they have not released their schedule. They have usually released it by now. They typically release it around sometime at the end of January, and media members have been getting a little restless. I was a little restless. I need content. It's the off season, right? We're looking for stuff to talk about. Well, the Big 12 decided to delay it, and it looks like one of the reasons may be they can kind of do it big, so to speak. Let's go ahead and pull up this announcement from the Big 12 on their X account. It says, taking over your TV, Big 12 Conference, Tuesday, February 4th, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Big 12 football schedule release is on these networks: ESPNU, ESPN Plus, FS2, Max, and True TV. And of course, it has your logos at the bottom. And West Virginia is actually in yellow on this one. Earlier, they had it in white. They must have changed it. Thank you, Big 12, for making that. Earlier, they had the West Virginia logo in white, and you couldn't even see it. But it looks like they may have changed it. But nonetheless, Big 12 making a big event out of their conference schedule release. Now, so far, Brett McMurphy leaked a few big games on his account. Let's go ahead and pull up Brett McMurphy's account. One of those games was a West Virginia game where they are traveling to Orlando to take on the UCF Knights. But Brett McMurphy says Big 12 2025 schedule features defending champ Arizona State at Baylor September 20th, Oklahoma State at Texas Tech October 25th, and West Virginia and Rich Rod at UCF and Scott Frost, two coaches who are returning to teams they used to coach at. That game will be October the 18th. Big 12 schedule will be released Tuesday, sources said. So, pretty cool stuff as far as the Big 12 schedule goes. I wanted to share that with you. All right. Next topic to discuss. According to, I think it was first released by this site called, well, let me just find it. I don't want to guess. Silver something. Silver Bulletin. The Silver Bulletin released former West Virginia head coach Neal Brown is reportedly a candidate for vacant Ohio State offensive coordinator position. Brown, whose offenses have always been highly ranked, runs a spread system similar to Ohio State's. Most of us know Neal Brown is a disciple of the air raid coaching tree from Hal Mumme, Mike Leach, and those types of guys. He's a disciple of that. Now, he has obviously evolved, and he's not a guy who's going to throw the ball 60, 70 times a game or 80%, 90% of the time like Mike Leach did. He has evolved from that, as most air raid coaches did, just like Dana Holgorsen and others, where he now runs a more balanced attack, where he will run the ball as much as he passes it, sometimes even more, depending on his personnel. Now, this was a little bit of a surprise to me. I did not expect Neal Brown's name to pop up. This here is an article from WV Sports Now by Mr. Mike Ostie. Says it's possible former WVU head coach Neal Brown may be on the verge of landing his next job, and it would be a big one. Rumors are circulating, including from credible places like 24/7 Sports, that Brown is a candidate to become Ohio State's next offensive coordinator. He talks about the Silver Bulletin report. Talks about how Chip Kelly is leaving the post at Ohio State to go be the OC for the Las Vegas Raiders. He talks about Brown being fired on December 1st. He goes on to talk about, says that Brown served as offensive coordinator at Troy, Texas Tech, and Kentucky before gaining his first head coaching opportunity in a return to Troy in 2015. After success at Troy, which included 3 straight 10-plus win seasons and a staple victory over LSU, WVU hired Brown to be the program's 35th head coach in 2019. Unfortunately for Brown, he was never able to achieve anything close to that with West Virginia. The Mountaineers went 37-35. We don't need to rehash that history. Says upon his WVU exit, Brown was linked to Group of 5 head coaching jobs at Appalachian State and Charlotte. Brown turned down both opportunities. While some may feel being a coordinator is a step down for someone who was just a head coach at Power 4 school, serving as an OC at a blue blood like Ohio State could do wonders to boost Brown's value for a future opening. Now, there's more, but I'm not going to read the whole thing. You guys can check it out over at WVSportsNow.com. Mr. Mike Ostie. Again, this was a surprise. I did not see Brown. I don't see Brown, even though he coached at West Virginia. He's a head coach with head coaching experience. I didn't envision him as a quote unquote big enough splash hire or big name, so to speak, to even be on the radar of a team like Ohio State. Would they want to hire a coach who just got fired? How would the fan base feel about that hire, right? Would the fan base get the Ohio State? You think there's pressure at West Virginia? Ohio State, multiply it by about 10. Now, in all fairness, he won't be the head coach, so the pressure is a little bit different, obviously. But there's still pressure there as the OC. But the cool thing about being an OC, number one, he can just coach ball, man. He don't have to deal with as much, at least, on the NIL front. He doesn't have to deal likely with parents complaining about their kids not getting to play and all of that. So there would be advantages to him coaching, or being an OC rather than being a head coach. And I think maybe that's attractive to somebody like Brown, who, he's been a head coach now for 10 straight years, 6 of that at West Virginia, where he was under a ton of pressure, a lot of negativity, especially this last season that he and his family both had to deal with. Maybe he does this. Maybe he takes some pressure off. Columbus, Ohio is a cool city. I'm not a big city guy myself, but I have been in Columbus multiple times. It's a cool little city. Or I shouldn't say little city. It's a cool city if you like city life. Brown can just kind of blend in there. There won't be the ton of pressure like he had at West Virginia to win. He can just coach ball, blend in. It's a good place for him to raise his family. I see it as actually a really positive move for Neal Brown. He's probably going to make a decent salary. He would probably make $1.5 $2 million a year there, which that actually benefits West Virginia, because West Virginia right now is still paying his buyout, which is 75% of his salary. So they're still having to pay him around $3 million a year, ballpark. I'm using round numbers, obviously. If he lands the Ohio State job, then that obviously would come down to right around, I don't know, let's just say he makes $2 million a year. Well, that means West Virginia only has to pay him $1 million a year. And in this era right now, where money is king and where revenue sharing is coming down the pipeline, where they're going to have to start paying players, upgrading facilities is important. All that's important. I could see where, the benefit to West Virginia would be really, really big there. That's an extra $2 million a year you have to spend towards revenue sharing. Paul talked about that on his show earlier. More rev share money, right? Updating facilities, all this. It's going to be important. All that's going to be important. So, that's a benefit. Now, there would be a disadvantage, though, to West Virginia. The one disadvantage I can think of is there are probably a lot of players on the West Virginia roster that would consider transferring on the offensive side of the ball, primarily, who might consider transferring to a place like Ohio State if Neal Brown was the offensive coordinator there. Now, let me put a caveat to that. It would only be the players who were talented enough to go to Ohio State or might fit Ohio State or who might be a target of Ohio State, those players. That's not going to be the entire offense now. No disrespect to the West Virginia offense, but Ohio State's national champs. They're a blue blood program. They're spending $20 million a year in NIL. They're going after 4- and 5-star guys. They did get C.J. Donaldson from the portal. Could they get somebody like, I don't know, Jaheim White, or I don't know, Rodney Gallagher, or Cam Vaughn, the big transfer? Which I don't know. Never mind. Cam Vaughn didn't play for Neal Brown, but you get my point, right? Any of these guys who played for Coach Brown at West Virginia, who might want to go play for him, that's something we would have to look out for. Now, do I think that the negative side would outweigh the positive of the money difference? I don't, because just to be frank, I only feel like there are a handful of guys on the West Virginia roster who Ohio State would probably go after. Now, we don't want to lose those guys. Don't get me wrong. But for Jaheim White, for example, I feel pretty confident that as long as Chad Scott is the running backs coach at West Virginia, I feel like Jaheim White will probably stay around. So I feel good about that. Other guys, I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see. Having Scott there is going to be good for the whole offensive side of the ball, in my opinion, as far as the guys who played for Coach Brown. But, they might be enticed to go play for Brown. Who knows? But we'll see. But again, I think saving that $2 million a year ballpark, again, I'm totally estimating. I don't know what they would pay him, but saving that $1.5 to $2 million a year, to me, would be more critical than the one or two players you may lose, unless, of course, it's Jaheim White. I think he's one of the few players on the team that are, I don't want to say irreplaceable, but hard to replace. But again, I do also trust Coach Rodriguez to go out and find the right guys for the job. And I do like the running backs he brought in from the portal, but I'm not ready to compare him to Jaheim White just yet. And Daniel, you make a great point. Daniel Gigax chimes in and says Gallagher's family ties to WV will keep him in Morgantown. And that's probably true, Daniel. They only live 30 minutes away, right? So, and Rodney's he's very close with his family, his dad, his sisters. They're very close family. So that definitely helps the cause for sure. Now, got Gamecock Chuck in the house. Gamecock Chuck, who's a VIP member, he says, all right, everyone, hit the thumbs up button. Couz is the man. Doesn't cost you anything. Gamecock, brother. Thank you. And by the way, if you want to keep up on what's going on with the South Carolina Gamecocks, this is your guy right here. Go check him out. Covers women's basketball, men's basketball, football, you name it. All right. I'll get to some more comments here in a minute, but on this, just to kind of close out this Neal Brown thing here, I just don't see this happening, folks. There are so many other candidates out there who, to me, would be bigger splash hires. They could promote Brian Hartline back to OC again. Now, he's already been OC once. It didn't quite pan out like they hoped, but maybe he learned from his mistakes, right? Or learned from, he got to sit under the tutelage of Chip Kelly for 1 year, one of the best minds in the game. Maybe that helped him learn a little bit. Maybe they promote him again. Maybe they, there are just a lot of names out there. Guys with NFL ties, guys who may have, Neal Brown to me, I just think, and again, no disrespect to Coach Brown, I do think he's a good offensive mind. He didn't do a great job as head coach at West Virginia, but I don't think play calling was our issue most of the time. Did it have its moments? Yes. But I think Neal Brown is a really good offensive play caller. I do. And a lot of people may not agree with that. I heard Paul say the same thing on his show, and I agree with him. He is a good play caller. I don't think play calling was our issue in most cases. I think, evaluation of talent may have been an issue at times. Hiring and or not firing staff members, the wrong staff members, may have been, part of the issue. Maybe not utilizing the right guys in certain spots. But as far as, I just don't think that was the issue at West Virginia. I thought the play calling was fine while he was running the offense. So I do think he could succeed at the job if he got it. I just don't see Ohio State hiring him. And here's my opinion on this. I actually think this is his agent. Neal Brown's agent is really good at getting his name out there for almost every single job that makes sense. His name got out there for the Wake Forest job. I think he really was a candidate for Appalachian State and Charlotte. He turned Charlotte down pretty quickly. The Appalachian State job, it kind of appeared like he might get that when he didn't. According to Mike Osti, he turned it down. But I see him going after somebody bigger. No offense to him again. I just don't think it's going to excite anyone, the donors for sure, to go out and get a coach who just got fired. You know what I mean, from West Virginia, who they're going to look at as a program that's below them, right? This guy just got fired at West Virginia. Why would we hire him? That's what some people are going to look at in this, in my opinion. Real quick, I want to give a shout out to those of you who are watching over on X or Twitter, whatever you call it. Please, once the show's over, please come over and check out my YouTube channel and subscribe over there if you haven't yet. It's Couz's Corner, hashtag college or Couz's Corner - college football. Please come check me out. Please subscribe. Please hit the thumbs up on my videos and all that. Only things that are streamed on X are my live streams. All my pre-recorded videos are done strictly on YouTube or sometimes on podcast platforms. So you can check me out on podcast platforms as well. Check out some of my shows there, whether it's Apple, Spotify, whatever. Come check me out. I'm in the middle of a series right now called Big 12 Spotlight. So far, we've talked about Texas Tech, and we've talked about UCF. I have hopefully TCU coming up next. We're going to try to cover all 15 other teams in the Big 12, hoping to bring on a guest who covers that team and try to just get their thoughts on the 2025 season for their respective teams. Just something I want to do to try to – I have a lot of fans who watch this show who are fans of other teams outside of West Virginia, and I felt like I wasn't showing them enough love, and this is my way of doing that. And Daniel Gigax, I don't necessarily agree with this comment, Daniel. He says if Hartline is promoted, Brown can get hired as the wide receiver coach, and maybe so. But here's what I think might be more likely to happen. I think there could be a domino effect here. For example, let's say they go out and hire an offensive coordinator from a G5 school or something like that. Maybe Brown gets that job, right? That's the first thing that comes to mind. Gets the offensive coordinator job, or they hire an OC from another Power 4 school, maybe a Big 12 school or an ACC school, something like that, and he gets that OC job. I just don't see him landing an OC job at one of the marquee brands. Not at this point in his career. Could he do it? Probably so. But I just don't see him landing it. I don't think the timing would be great for them to make that move. Just my opinion. Again, just my opinion. I hope Neal lands on his feet. I wish him nothing but the best. I have no ill will towards Neal Brown at all. Seems like a great person, a great family man, a great dad, a great husband, all that. And again, it would save West Virginia somewhere in the neighborhood of probably about $1.5 million to $2 million a year on his buyout. And we need that money. And we're going to talk about that on the segment 3 of the show. Okay. But before we get into segment 2, I do want to give another shout out, shout out to one of my other sponsors here, Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner. So sit tight, and I'll be right back here in about 35-40 seconds. Since 1931, the attorneys at Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Cats, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. All righty. Thank you for letting me keep the lights on here, or helping me keep the lights on by being patient and sitting through the that ad read there. Let's go ahead and jump into topic 2 of the show, which is Rich Rod's appearance on Three Guys a few days ago. He appeared on Three Guys Before the Game podcast with Tony Caridi, Brad Howe, and Hoppy Kirchhoff. Now, Hoppy started off the show asking him about his past, why he left West Virginia, all that. Look, that's been rehashed 100 times. He talked about the $50,000 they wouldn't give him for his coaching staff. He did admit that he probably made a decision based on emotion and probably should have thought it through and stayed. Talked about how Michigan was not really, he said had he visited Michigan before he took the job, he wouldn't have taken it. He was wanting West Virginia to upgrade facilities and stuff. Michigan's facilities were not much better, according to him. So Michigan had a lot of work to do, but they weren't, according to him, they didn't feel like they needed to do a whole lot because they were Michigan. You can tell he's not, you can always tell Rich Rod by the comments he makes, not very high on his stay at Michigan. But nonetheless, You can tell he regrets leaving. I did read between the lines. There's a lot more to the story than just that 50,000. He did make a point to say it wasn't Ed Passalone, the current the AD at that time, who was the issue. It was someone higher than him. But, he just wasn't real happy with where money was being allocated and things like that. So, it is what it is. Kind of old news, right? What I want to focus on, though, is the now. Let's focus on the now. Number one, what I noticed with Coach Rod is his confidence and his confidence in his own ability to coach ball. He's very confident in his approach. He's very confident that they're going to win football games. He's very confident in bringing in the right guys. He seems he doesn't seem to me now. Some people may disagree, but he doesn't seem cocky to me. He doesn't seem brash or overly arrogant. He just seems very confident in what he's doing. He's been doing it a long time. He has a formula that works, and he believes in that formula. And he also believes in the staff he has surrounded himself with, and that makes me feel good. There were times throughout his tenure I didn't get that same confidence from Neal Brown, or at least didn't feel like he had that same confidence. He talked about the quarterbacks. He's got like 7 quarterbacks on the roster now, total, and said, he may not be done. He said, I might get up to 9 or 10. He said, the more quarterbacks you have, the more competition. He said, I'd like to have at least minimum of 2 guys, hopefully 3 guys that I feel comfortable winning games with. And obviously, if you bring in 10, then you obviously have a lot more options, and your chances of getting that 2 or 3 guys is much higher. Now, he did say that he feels like the guys he has are good enough, but why not add to the room and add competition? That's his strategy. And I know some people disagree with that strategy, but again, it's his formula. He believes in it. So if he may go out in the spring portal and add more quarterbacks, you never know. He talks about how the team needs more speed. He kind of hinted about last year's team, that the guys that were left over, that there wasn't enough speed at certain positions. He'd like to go out and get some more speed across the board, basically for the whole team. The team speed overall wasn't good enough, so he talked about that, which I like. Rich Rod's teams are based on speed, especially on the offensive side of the ball. He talked about the team culture, how, it's important to recruit guys not just because they're talented, but they have to fit the culture of your team. And he talked about how teams who don't do that typically don't win, regardless of how talented they are. He talked about, I thought this was funny. There will be no dancing on TikTok, he said. Now, that might sound old school to a lot of people. I kind of like it. I'm not a huge fan. Look, I wasn't going to bash players for dancing on TikTok. I know Hudson Clement was pretty popular about his TikTok dances and whatnot. I didn't care. No big deal. I didn't love it. But again, it's this generation. But I just don't think it displays toughness, right? You want toughness. You want, Coach Rod's all about the hard edge, about toughness. I don't think that displays toughness. It's just me. Now, I'm sure he can't control what they do outside of the locker room and off the field, but apparently when they're inside the facility or on the premises, they're not going to be dancing on TikTok. And I kind of dig it. I think they need to be all about book business, Doesn't mean they can't cut up and goof off and have fun, but there's not going to be any dancing on TikTok. He also talked about the guys that wear one-leg tights. They wear those black tights on one leg and not 2. He said there's not going to be any of that either unless they have a knee problem or something and they can't wear 2. Again, I like that, but I'm kind of an old school guy. I never have liked that look. Why would you wear the tights on one leg and not both? I don't get it, and he don't like it either, so they're not allowing it to happen. Again, but in this generation of player, there are going to be some players who look at that and go, you know what? That guy's a little too strict for me. But those guys are not fits at West Virginia. That's just the way it is. He's going to bring in guys that are okay, dressing the way he wants them to dress, to get, keeping the TikTok dances for, outside the facilities and those types of things. And I like that. When it comes to the spring game, he talked about how the spring game is going to be extremely short this year. He said it might be the shortest spring game in history. That to me, I understand it, but I also from a fan perspective, can they do something? Maybe they'll do something else to make the fans want to come, because I would like to see really high turnout for that. I think it's a really good way to set the tone for the season. I think it looks good on television if you have a lot of fans there. It's usually a charity event for the WVU Medicine Children's, so I think that's important as well, raising money for that. But I'm sure he'll have other activities around it other than just the game. There'll be meet and greets. There'll be other things going on. But he's also going to have the spring game early. He's going to have it's going to actually going to be played on April the 5th. They're actually going to start spring camp in late February. So it's going to be cold, but he said that they would use the indoor facility when they needed to. So that's one thing he talked about. Spring game will be earlier in the year because, they have that spring portal window coming up. And by doing it earlier, it gives them a week or two to kind of evaluate everybody before the portal opens, right? That way, if they got guys, they may want to encourage some guys to get in the portal right after they see them through spring camp. They also may want to go out and get some guys from other teams. It gives them time to evaluate the people who may enter the portal or may, okay, if this guy enters the portal, we want to give him a call, right? And you kind of be ready for that. That's the types of things that they're probably preparing for by giving them that extra week or two. And for the players too, I mean, it gives them extra time to make a decision, to be honest with you. So it kind of goes both ways. They may actually lose more guys by doing that because it gives the guys extra time to make the decision. But I think Rich Rod trusts his instincts enough and his talent evaluation skills enough to risk that. And he even talked about that. He said, within 4 practices, I'll know if a guy's going to make it or not. He's that confident in his ability. He talked about Zach Alley and how he's going to be an aggressive play caller. He wants a lot of 3 and outs, and he thinks Zach can do that. Zach's going to be, send blitzes from a lot of different places that people probably don't even realize, may have never even seen. He loves his creativity in that. Talked about that. And then lastly on this topic, he talked about, Tony asked him about how they're going to manage the revenue sharing money. Not everybody's going to get the same amount of money. The better you perform, the more money you're going to get paid. He's calls it earned success. You're going to earn your success. It's just like the pro model. You perform on the field, you're going to get a higher percentage of the revenue share money. It's that simple. Pay the ones, and I love that model. I think that's the way it should be. I'm sure every team's probably going to do, or most teams anyway, are going to do something similar to that. I like it. There are certain positions who are likely going to make more than others. He said he does want to make sure his second string quarterback gets paid because, and he stressed this, the way we run our quarterbacks a lot. So we need at least 2 quarterbacks who can play minimum. And I want to make sure, and he even this is something else I noticed that I forgot to mention earlier when talking about the quarterbacks. He actually gives his second team quarterback equal reps at practice. That's interesting. You don't usually see that with most teams. Usually your starter gets about 80% of the reps, 75, 80% of the reps. Your second stringer gets the other 20, 25%. Rich Rod will actually give his first team and second team even amount of reps, and then the third team guy might even get a few reps. But the reason he's able to do that is because where they play with tempo, they play so fast, they get more reps in, which means they're able to get more guys reps. So they're not necessarily shorting reps. They're not getting less reps at practice. They're actually getting so many more reps that they're able to get their backups more time in practice. And I think that's awesome. So like last year, for example, or 2 years ago when Nico had to come in at the pit game and they basically had to get rid of most of the playbook, you won't have to do that with Rich Rod's offense. The playbook will be at his disposal because he's gotten just as many reps as the other guy. And I love that approach. It's something I hadn't thought about, but when he said it, I thought, man, that's the one thing about playing with tempo that I never thought about is the practice reps you get. Genius. I say genius. It's kind of simple, common sense if you think about it, but how many coaches are actually implementing it? It'll be interesting to see. All right, let me I do need to do one more quick ad read, and then we'll get to topic 3, and then we'll get to your comments. You got to give a shout out to BetUS. Usually you guys hear me talk about their online casino. They also do have an online betting, online sports betting. They also do have an online casino. If you go to betus.com/casino, you can get up to a 200% sign-on, 200% bonus on your first deposit at betus.com/casino. 200% sign-up bonus on your first deposit, and you get 125% on your next 2 deposits. But make sure if you take advantage of this deal that you please play responsibly, okay? Don't be, gambling away your family's inheritance or your mortgage, and I'm not saying that to be I'm not saying that to be funny. It actually happens more than we think. So please don't do that, okay? All right. And if you have a problem and you get tempted to do that, call 1-800-GAMBLER.com, or I'm sorry, 1-800-GAMBLER for help. All right. the last topic of the show, and then we're going to get into the comment section. Appreciate everybody hopping on. Again, if you're watching on X, please hop over to my YouTube channel once the show's over and subscribe if you haven't yet. Country roads, these curvy country roads are leading me to 10,000 subs, and I'm almost there. And don't forget, too, come over and subscribe to Hoops from the Hills, the West Virginia channel where I cover basketball. Come check me out there, too. Last topic, and this is the one I really, really was excited to talk about tonight. I ran across. I got to give a shout. Well, I don't know if he wants me to say his name, but I had a very loyal follower of the channel send me this link to this article about the Big 12, and was it a mistake to expand and especially to add the four corner schools? Now, I think most of us on the surface would say no, right? It expands the league. It kept them whole. It kept them. What's the word? It strengthens them for the long term, right? It gives you 16 members versus only 12. Should be attractive when the next media deal comes up in 2031. Get you some good brands like Colorado, Arizona State, Utah, right? Good brands. All of them are good brands, good solid brands, and both football and basketball. So, where did I get this idea that it may be a mistake? Well, let's talk about that. I'm gonna pull up this article right now from Hawkeye Athletics, or it's actually from the Gazette.com. It's in Iowa, and it talks about the Iowa Board of Regents, who oversees both Iowa State, and Northern Iowa athletics, right, or universities. It says UI Athletics owes 83% on its $50 million. That's Iowa. But anyway, it says Hawkeye Athletics eyes revenue record. Cyclones cite realignment and budget projections. Now, we're going to focus, obviously, here on Iowa State because that's where it affects the Big 12 in this realignment. So let's go ahead and dig in. It says too many ads here, but I shouldn't complain. I'm going to have ads on my site too when it's ready. But anyway, it says Iowa State University Athletics. We're skipping down to the second paragraph here. Iowa State University Athletics is projecting its fiscal 2025 revenue to reach $114.2 million, above last year's $111.5 million budget, but below its actual 2024 income of nearly $117 million. According to ISU Senior Associate Athletics Director Nick Juice. So their revenue they're expecting their revenue to drop in 2025. From $117 million to $114.2 million. So, not good. It says that $114.2 million next year is below what it could be, citing a conference realignment whirlwind across college athletics of late that added 4 universities to both UI's Big 10 and Iowa State's Big 12 conferences, shrinking their share of the conference distribution pie. As a result of those additions, the 8 continuing – listen to this. As a result of those additions, the 8 continuing members of the Big 12 Conference will receive approximately $40 million less than earlier projections in Big 12 distributions over the next several years through fiscal year 2031. Now, when I first read that, and that's according to Iowa State's recent budget report, I first read that, I thought, holy crap, $40 million a year, that's $5 million per team, but it's actually not. It's $40 million throughout the life of the contract, which goes through 2031. But it's still – it says the 8 continuing members, which includes the team I cheer for, the West Virginia Mountaineers, the 8 continuing members of the Big 12 Conference will receive approximately $40 million less than earlier projections in Big 12 distributions over the next several years. So every team's taking a pay cut. Every team's taking a haircut on their Big 12 payouts, which comes from what? Media revenue. The TV revenue that goes to the conference, which is then distributed to the schools. Every Legacy 8 member of the Big 12 is taking a haircut on what they originally projected. Let's keep going. Here's a quote. It says, revenues received from the Big 12 Conference are the largest component of athletic department revenues, Juice told the Gazette on Tuesday. The highest revenues from the Big 12 Conference were recorded in fiscal year 22 and 23. Additionally, due to the college football playoff expansion, playoff revenues will no longer be distributed on an equal basis to the major conferences, Iowa State reported to the Regents. With 2 athletic conferences essentially receiving the contractual increases in television revenue resulting from the new playoff format, the revenue allocations to members of the Big 12 Conference will remain flat. Now, we know the Big 12 got a bump because of the expansion of the college football playoff, right? Every team's getting a bump from I think it's going from $3 million to $6 million a year, something like that. But because of additional expenses and the costs associated with expansion, they're basically flat despite that. So had they not gotten that increase, they would actually be losing money. But the problem is they're not gaining money like their peers. The ACC has it's my understanding now, I may be wrong on this, but it's my understanding the ACC has a built-in escalator in their contract with the ACC network or with ESPN rather. Their revenue from the ACC network is expected to increase next year, maybe even in future years. So even though the ACC right now might be on the same playing field at least as the Big 12, I think over time, now I could be wrong, but at least for the next 5 years anyway, I think the ACC is going to surpass the Big 12 in revenue. Now the Big 12 could overtake them in the long term because the ACC is still stuck in that deal that they have through 2036, whereas the Big 12 can go back to the negotiating table in 2031. So they might surpass the ACC long term, but in the next 5 to 6 years, the ACC is likely going to earn more money than the Big 12 teams. Let's keep going. The financial impact of this change is approximately $5 million per year when compared to earlier projections. So they're losing $5 million a year more than what they projected because the SEC and the Big Ten are getting such a huge share of the playoff money. Let's keep going. It says the lower than expected conference distribution, anticipated $746,000 drop in media rights income, and stagnant postseason revenue has Iowa State postponing several building projects and making, quote, operational and personnel changes as necessary, end quote. So they might have to fire people or lay people off, is the way it's worded, because of all these changes. Because the SEC and Big Ten got greedy. Well, I shouldn't say greedy. I guess they want to avoid laying people off as well. But you get my point. Because they're so far ahead of the ACC and Big 12, some of these schools may have to lay people off. And because they're having to pay because they're seeing a $746,000 a year drop in media revenue, media rights income, because of expansion, because they're having to allocate their money to more teams, which we'll get to in a minute on why that's the case, they might have to lay people off and not be able to talk. And it goes on to talk about a new wrestling facility that they wanted to build. It says, when asked for details on delayed projects and personnel changes, Juice pointed to plans for a new $20 million wrestling facility the department put on hold in May, citing changes across the college landscape. It says, there's just no way possible to go forward and convince the state that we can take bonds out to pay for a wrestling facility when the college football playoff decided to take all the money and give it to the Big Ten and SEC. Pollard told reporters in May. So you can tell Jamie Pollard was not a fan of that decision. It says Juice didn't provide details about personnel changes resulting from conferences and playoff redistributions. So anyway, it goes later. It talks about ticket revenue and all that, but I want to focus right here on this part about the expansion. See, we all assumed that, at least I did. I shouldn't speak for you. A lot of us assumed that both ESPN and Fox were stepping up to pay 100% for the Four Corners to come in. Now, ESPN had to because they were contractually obligated to cover their cost because of the pro rata agreement in the contract with the Big 12. But the ESPN is only paying 60% of that contract. The other 40% is or I think it's 66%. It's 2/3 basically. The rest of it is being paid by Fox. Fox is not contractually obligated to pay a full pro rata, and apparently they did not do that. It appears that Fox did not give a full pro rata share to the Big 12 for adding the Four Corner schools. So that, I think now it's fair to ask that question. Should they have even done the deal? Should they have added the Four Corner schools if Fox wasn't in agreement to pay off full pro rata? And in addition to that, should the Big 12 have paid, they paid Colorado a $2.5 million signing bonus to come into the Big 12. I don't know how many of you realize that. Colorado got a $2.5 million bonus for entering the Big 12 conference. The only one of the four who got that because they were the first one to pull the trigger. If you're already losing 746,000, this is Iowa State's numbers. It may be, but it should be the same across the board, you'd think, for all Legacy 8 members. If you're already losing $746,000 is a drop in the bucket compared to $31 million, right? But it adds up over time. That's $746,000 a year. It adds up to $5 million over about a 6-year period or 5-year period or whatever. You just do the math. That's for West Virginia. That $5 million is 1 year salary to Rich Rodriguez and Zach Alley. You're paying 1 year salary to those guys. It's an extra It's an extra $746,000 you have to pay student athletes in revenue. You know how many football players you can pay with $746,000? Several, or at least a very good quarterback at minimum. So a year, by the way. So this right here, it's hard. It's fair to ask the question. Now, long term, I think adding them, fantastic decision. I think you have to add them. So when you go back to the negotiating table in 2031 with the networks, you have that extra inventory, and you have multiple time zones now. You have all 4 time zones now. You have different markets to get ads in. All that. It's all great long term, right? Fights, 6, 7, 8, 10, 20 years down the road. But here's the problem with that. Things are moving so fast in college athletics, you can't afford to wait 5 years to get your money back. So now do you understand why the Big 12 is looking at private equity? Now do you know why Gordon Gee and others are trying their best to get a Super League going with backing of private equity? Big 12 teams, the Legacy 8 Big 12 teams lost money, or at least lost money on their future projections, which is what you use to make business decisions with on facility upgrades and hiring decisions and all those types of things. You use future projections. You don't base it on what you're doing today. You have to look ahead. Based on future projections, they're taking a haircut for adding the 4 corner schools. So, do I think adding the 4 corner schools was a bad idea? I'm going back and forth on it, to be honest with you, because I understand the long-term benefit of it. And I understand that at the time when they were sitting down at the table, they probably didn't know about the house settlement. I mean, I'm sure they knew they knew it was out there, but they may not have known what it was going to look like and that it was going to happen so soon, would be my guess. Again, I'm speculating here. I've got the tinfoil hat on a little bit. I would assume they wouldn't know that. And they may not have had all the information that we have now before they made the decision. But man, and 746,000, I guess at the end of the day is not a huge amount of money for a university. But man, when you're already behind everybody else, you're basically already in 4th place today in conference payout. Again, you're just, you and the ACC are basically neck and neck. But for all intents and purposes, you're no better than 3rd, and you may be 4th in conference payout. You're trying to compete with these teams for recruits. You're trying to compete with them in wins and losses. I can't help but question whether it was the right move or not. Maybe the conference would have been better off staying at 12 teams. I don't know. You tell me. What do you think in the comments section? And I don't mean this as a shot at my Big 12 brethren in Arizona and Utah and Colorado. Not a shot at all. I just can't help but wonder, if this is making you go backwards from a profitability perspective, from a revenue perspective, I don't understand why you made the move. Again, I know it was a long-term move, but man, you can't bleed money for 5 years waiting on what's going to happen in 10. Not as fast as things are moving right now. I'm anxious to see what you guys are saying in the comments here. So let's get over to it. I have a really big crowd on tonight. I really appreciate you hopping on. 272 total on here right now. Daniel Gigx says, I saw that article, and the 4 corners ads are solid athletic programs. And yes, it's extra travel, but all conferences have extra travel. Yes, the travel is, to me, I'm not even at this point. I think the travel thing is not even worth bringing up because it is what it is at this point. You got to deal with it, figure it out. Daniel also goes on to say, I saw what he saw. Sorry. WV Fan 13 says if Big 12 could add some of the old Big East schools, that would level out the cross-country travel for teams, would bring back some old rivalries. Pirate Mitch, thank you for joining the show, says, man, all the Olympic sports will be gone in 10 years. It will be basketball, baseball, and softball, maybe soccer, and that's it. And that's what we're afraid of, man. Now, football makes money for all the other programs. So that's why it's desperation time for these universities to make as much money as they can because they're trying to save. It's not just about competing on we talk about competing on a football field because that's what we're all passionate about. But when you're in the minds of these university presidents and these ADs, they're not just thinking about competing on a football. They're actually thinking about not just competing, but fielding teams in some of these other sports. You've got to field a wrestling team. You've got to field a cross-country team. You've got to field a track team, a softball team, a baseball team, gymnastics team, whatever sport you name. You've got to have those teams, right, if you're in the Big 12. Or at least you want to try to keep them as many as possible. And all of that money comes from football. So, again, what if you have to cut a sport because of what if bringing in the four corner school? And I might be over embellishing a little bit here, but what if bringing in these teams causes you to have to drop a sport from your school? It's things like that make me, I can't help but wonder if it was the right. And I can tell you one thing, this definitely made me change my mind on bringing in UConn. I was all on board of bringing UConn in, but I don't know that that's the right move right now. Unless you get extra money today for doing it, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. But West Virginia already. Let's take a look at West Virginia. And I know I talked about this on my show a gazillion times. Some of you may get tired of hearing it, but some of you may be new. West Virginia is facing a $137 million ballpark, $137 million debt service right now for past projects they've done at the stadiums and at their facilities, athletic facilities overall. $130-some million. Highest in the league. One of the highest in the country, if I'm not mistaken, among Power 4 schools. They have one of the lowest revenues in the conference already. They're near the bottom, if not at the bottom. The fiscal year 2024 or fiscal year 22, 23 or 23, 24 fiscal year, I think it was. I saw the numbers just a couple of days ago. Came out to about $108 million. About a $3 million increase from before. But that $3 million was probably projected to be even more than that. I haven't looked. Going by what this Iowa State article said, I'd say West Virginia was projecting to be higher than $108 million. They were probably projecting to be at $110, $112 million. And again, you base decisions on your projections, not on what you're making today. So that's how these things work. But my point being, if you can't make money today by bringing in a new school, then don't do it. You have to. Things are moving so rapidly in college sports. I don't think they need to expand at all unless you know with 100% certainty that it's increasing your value today. You say no. And you wait till 2029, 2030 when you're ready to renegotiate a TV deal. Then you make the move if it's going to help you in that deal. But otherwise, you don't do it. So anyway, Daniel Gigax says, money issues are at all universities that are not in the SEC or Big Ten. You are going to see a lot of D1 non-football schools drop a lot of sports or move to D3 so they don't have scholarships. It may have been Roy. I don't remember. I was just assuming. I don't think it was ever reported, at least not that I read, whether it was 100% or not. I just kind of assumed it, I guess. I never did see any numbers that I just assumed that these schools wouldn't approve a deal that was going to cost them money. I mean, I had read where the Legacy 8 members had to take a little bit of a pay cut to bring Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, and UCF in the league. I knew about that, but that was only like a 2-year. They were taking about a $3 million a year hit for like 2 years or something like that. I didn't think that was a huge deal. I didn't love it, but I didn't think it was a huge deal. But that was also before they brought the Four Corner schools in or were even planning to. It wasn't even an option at that point, right? Well, now they're taking it looks like they're taking another bath to the tune of $700 plus million. I'm sorry, 700 plus thousand dollars per school per year because of bringing in the Four Corners. And I'm assuming it's because Fox didn't pay full pro rata. I understand, Daniel, but if you're, I get that. I get that. And I, like I said, I understand that point. But man, by the time 2031 gets here, you're going to be so far behind. You might as well what I'm saying is you're in a crisis, kind of. Maybe crisis is a strong word, but you can't afford to wait you can't lose money for 5 years or go backwards for, not lose money, but you see what I'm saying. You can't just remain flat for 5 years when everybody else, including the ACC, is going to be making more money. They could be a distant fourth by the time 2031 gets here. And if the ACC is able to renegotiate that grant of rights or something to where teams can leave at 2031 and they can renegotiate a new deal at 2031, Big 12 might be screwed here. I don't know. Maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, as they say. I don't know. Daniel says he has a video on private equity. Yeah, go check that out. Daniel does a really good job talking about giving his thoughts on private equity. I recommend you go check it out. Roy Wall says he didn't like the addition, but not because of money. The 4-pack schools had just burned their conference to the ground, and they will do it again. I don't know that I blame them per se. I blame the whole league. We did find out that Utah was they were one of the schools that decided that bucked that the offer from ESPN, and they wanted more. They may not have been the only one, but that did come out. They thought they were worth $50 million a year when ESPN had offered them about 30. Let's see. Tim McMahon says, I'm an Ohio State fan, so really no dog in the fight. However, for long-term stability, the Big 12 did well getting the 4 Pac-12 schools. And again, I don't want to make it sound like I actually am. Look, long-term, I love having those guys in the league as a fan. But I didn't realize it was going to have this much of a negative impact on the revenue, the immediate revenue distributions. But at the end of the day, I guess, and again, I'm kind of going through this with you guys in real time here, trying to figure it out in my own head here. I guess long term it was the right play because like I said, you're getting the 4 extra time zones. Especially with the Coach Dion, the Coach Prime effect that it's having on the league, that's going to help us, I think. So, I guess each school just has to figure out a way to overcome that. $700,000 deal, the gap there. Each school should be able to figure out a way to close that on their own. I think the college football playoff piece is probably even more important than the expansion piece. The Big 12 and ACC not getting equal revenue share in the college football playoff is, I think, might have hurt the two leagues more than what we want to realize or pretend, because again, schools were making long-term projections based on a specific number, and then they're not getting anywhere near that number. It's about $5 million less than what they anticipated. So, again, I don't want to make it sound like I'm crapping all over the Four Corner schools, because I'm not, and I wanted the move to happen. And I still think at the end of the day, it was probably the right decision. But it was just kind of a punch to the gut when I found out they're losing even more. They're took a $740,000 bath on it. It was kind of a shock to me. Let me see what other comments we got in the house. DEM Gaming, thank you for joining the show. Says, who knows what the college football landscape even looks like in 2031. We need to plan for today, not 6 years from now. WV Fan 13 says, we are not also not talking about that poor sports performance produces poor attendance, produces poor revenue. Absolutely. Clint Moses said adding G5s were the head scratcher for me while still claiming P5. Clint Moses, that was a desperation move that they had to make to keep the conference alive. They were up on the heels of negotiating a new TV deal, and they had to do something. Had they not added the Four Corner schools, they don't have the TV deal they got today. And in order to get the TV deal, they lost 2 schools. They had to add 4 to offset it, and it still didn't even come close to the same value, right? Even though they increased in value from the last contract, they would have gotten a lot more had Oklahoma, Texas been in the conference. I mean, I've said all along, I think the conference likely could have gotten $50 million, a year potentially per school had Texas and Oklahoma still been in the league, and would probably be sitting pretty in the 3rd spot right now. But that didn't happen. They left us, so they had to do what they had to do. And I think adding those, I think they were in desperation mode. I mean, you went from having 10 teams to having 8 teams, right? Now, you still had enough to be a power league, but you didn't have let's just be honest. West Virginia, Kansas State, Iowa State, Kansas, TCU, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, Baylor. That would have been your 8 schools. What would you have gotten for that? 25 million a year? Maybe 20 to 25 a year. I mean, there have been reports out there that they say BYU alone might have added $2 to $2.5 million a year to the deal. You take them off, that's, what's that, 29 million a year? 28, 29 million a year. So, I mean, you needed a market, you needed inventory, you needed content for the networks. So I think adding them was kind of they did it out of desperation, man. Now, had the Four Corner schools been available then? Or had you, I'm sure if your Mark or Bowlesby at the time, had Bowlesby known the Four Corner schools were going to be available, then yeah, you probably don't add the 4 G5s. You may add 2 of them. Maybe you add BYU and Cincinnati or BYU and UCF or whatever. You probably don't add all 4. And then you wait and you go grab the Four Corner schools. That would have been my strategy probably. But again, they didn't know the Pac-12 was going to collapse, so they had no choice. They had to do something to save the conference. Let's see. Cold D's in the house. It definitely hurt TV viewership big time. Being harsh on Four Corners is understood. G5 edition has been disappointing besides BYU. UH is doing what it's supposed to do to be very good in basketball. Talking about Houston. Yeah, Houston's a great ad in basketball. Every one of those schools brings something to the table. Don't get me wrong. Houston brings great basketball, and their football brand, I think, is on the rise. UCF brings a huge alumni base, huge enrollment. You get you into Florida, quality football brand. Cincinnati, obviously good football brand. Get you into a new market in Ohio. And then BYU obviously brings you a very, very large and passionate fan base. It's a national brand, if maybe even an international brand because of the Church of Latter-day Saints. Again, of the 4, we're definitely the most valuable addition, in my opinion. That's been reported. You could argue, there's a fair argument to make that BYU may be the biggest brand in the Big 12 right now, right? And I'm saying that as a West Virginia fan. I'm not saying that's the case, but I think it's a fair argument to make. I'm hoping to eventually do a video about, the brands and ordering them. But I haven't had a chance to sit down and crunch the numbers yet. But yeah, they all 4 bring something to the table. And the Four Corners, again, they all bring something. Arizona brings a great basketball brand, get you into a new market. Arizona State, obviously, we saw what they did in football. That brings you Phoenix. It brings you a good football brand. They both bring you the Pacific time zone, at least part of the year. Obviously, Colorado, you're getting Coach Prime, plus you're getting a good historic brand who's won a national championship in the last 40 years, 25 years. And then you've got, obviously Utah, who's been basically the best team in the Pac-12 was the best team in the Pac-12 or one of the best teams in the Pac-12 for the past 5 years. A very solid brand, uh, you know, with a has made two straight Rose Bowls. They all bring something to the table. It was a shock to my system when I read that article. I ain't gonna lie to you, and it made me second guess the additions. Can't help it. Again, not trying to take shots at anybody, but I'm a fan of one of those 8 teams that are taking a $740,000 haircut here. All right. Daniel Gigax says BYU has a huge following in California. That alone is why adding them was a no-brainer. That's fair. And I was all for the addition of BYU from the get-go. Their fan base, they've been awesome. Actually, I've enjoyed my interactions with about all the fans. Even the Utah fans of late have been better. The ones who watch me on YouTube are pretty cool. The ones on X, not so much. But the YouTube comments I've gotten from Utah fans have been extremely respectful and kind. So it's kind of made me change my tune about that fan base. But yeah, we've had our ups and downs with them for sure. And I don't think it's a secret they didn't really want to come to the Big 12, but I don't think any of those conference schools did. Nobody wants to see their conference fall apart. You can't blame them for that. Now the way they handled it on social media, I wasn't a huge fan of that. The other 3 schools handled it much better, but yeah, I mean, all 8 schools that have been added bring something to the table. I think they've all been good additions to the league. I enjoy playing those schools. Hopefully some good rivalries can come out of it, some exciting games. But again, it's hard to swallow when you're one of the poorest teams already in the Power 4. I'm a fan of one of the poorest teams in the Power 4 already, and adding those schools I don't think helped us at all, just to be frank. So, I think it's fair for me to question it. Jeremy Armour-Trout says, hey, we as a conference need to leave absolutely no doubt and win. Winning brings recruits more eyes. So if we don't win an national championship title as a conference in years, then we get what we get. And Jeremy, that's a very straightforward, honest answer, my man. It really is. And I really appreciate that outlook and your honesty there. And that's just the cold, hard truth. It's the cold, hard truth. Big 12 has to win on the field. They have to win on the court. Primarily on the field because we all know football is driving the bus here. It would have been a huge help if Arizona State could have pulled off that game against Texas. They didn't, but they at least showed out and played well. Yeah, and I really hope, Clint Moses, to your comment there, I really hope, talking about Big 12 fans being great, and it's the ADs that scare you, and you're talking about Yormark as a business guy, I hope Yormark doesn't push too hard. I really, after reading this article, I think he really needs to pump the brakes on the UConn talk. I really don't think it's a good idea to add them right now. Again, if you add them in 2029, 2030, 2031, I'm cool with it if you think it brings more value. Or if there's some scenario pops up where ESPN or Fox or even a third media partner comes to the table and says, hey, we'll give you more money if you add them, that's different. Or if private equity comes to the table and you need to, all that could change my opinion. But as we sit here today, things remain status quo as they are right now, I am not for adding UConn today. And I was before I read this article. Because I don't know how you pay for it. You've got to pay for them to come in the league. And I don't want our teams to take any more of a haircut than they already have. So, and I haven't had a chance to I don't know the numbers yet. I haven't had a chance to dig into it. But I'm wondering if because of this step back in revenue projections now that the Big 12 schools, the Legacy 8 Big 12 schools are seeing, are the newcomers seeing that too, or just the Legacy 8 members? That's obviously, I know the 3 AAC schools in BYU, they're obviously getting such a huge jump in revenue from what they're accustomed to. You got to kind of not even count them in this conversation for now. But as far as the 4 corner schools from the pack, I would like to hope they're making the same amount of money as a Legacy 8. If they're making more, if I find out they're making more money, I'm really going to be pissed. I ain't gonna lie to you. I'm not a huge fan of paying Colorado that $2.5 million signing bonus. To be honest, though, was that necessary to do that? Maybe it was. I don't know. And I know getting them in was really what really cracked open the Big 12 or Pac-12, and that's what they needed to happen. But man, I don't know. It's just hard to swallow when you know your team's taking a freaking financial bath. John Dry says most of the ACC schools are getting haircuts like Louisville, Duke, and others. Are they poachable? I don't know, man. I'd like the schools in the ACC. That's a very interesting conversation because even though the ACC seems to be stable at least to 2031, when you look at a school, and I understand the schools at the bottom like the Wake Forest, the Boston Colleges, they're probably just happy to keep the conference together and get what they can get, right? Not happy is the wrong word. They're not happy about it, but they're probably content. They're just, whew, man, we survived this thing, right? That's their feelings. Kind of like the Big 12 was when they added the 4 new schools a couple years ago and survived. That's probably how they're feeling right now. But the schools in the middle, like Louisville, Duke, maybe Georgia Tech, Syracuse, I would put those 4 schools in that category. They're probably sitting there going, why do we not deserve more money? We have a pretty high brand value. Why do we deserve to give more of our money to UNC when we've been kicking their butt all over the field for the last X number of years? Look at Syracuse is on the rise right now. Their football program is in a very good spot right now. With Fran Brown at the helm, Syracuse is kicking butt and taking names. Louisville historically has been a better team the last several years in football, I would argue, than UNC. You could even argue Duke's been as good as UNC. We all know Duke's killing it in basketball. So if I'm those schools, I'm sitting here going, why should I pay you more money when I'm doing just as good as you are? And my brand, in their mind, their brand is just as valuable as that brand. So those schools are the ones in the middle of the ACC, the middle tier, are the ones I think might be the most at risk of leaving the league. Now, I don't know that anybody's going to leave the league. I'm not predicting that to happen. I just think if there are teams that are probably more frustrated about how things are going, it would be them. Tim McMahon says he didn't really love in-state Cincinnati getting power conference status, and that's fair, Tim. I figured there would be some Ohio State fans not happy about that. Timothy Green in the house, who's a VIP member, says, let's go Mountaineers. I truly believe we're going to have a really good year in football, and I think the second year will be even better. Timothy, I agree. I'm excited about the Rich Rod era. I'm not going to go out here and predict, something magical, but I do think 6-7 wins is very, very doable in year one. And even better is, a possibility. I'm just trying to keep my expectations reasonable because they're going to have a very tough schedule next year. Let's see. Tumasa says one could assume Utah upper brass would let it be known if they had to take a haircut. Probably so. That's a great point, Tumasa. They probably wouldn't take it lying down, would they? But I think they were again in a situation where they kind of had no choice. Even with that haircut, Tumasa, they're still going to make more than they would have made in the pack with that $20 or $25 million Apple deal. Now the Apple deal had escalators in it, so maybe they wouldn't have. But when Oregon and Washington decided to leave for the Big Ten, it kind of blew everything up. Colorado alone leaving wasn't going to blow the conference up. But when Washington and Oregon decided to leave, that's when it all went to hell in a handbasket. Tim McMahon says, Couz, I agree. Bowlesby did what he could keep the league going. BYU is a very good ad. Houston keeps 4 Texas schools in, and UCF adds Florida as well. Yeah, and I think that was part of the thinking. Arizona State and UCF have the 2 largest enrollments of any public universities in the country. And they are both in the Big 12. That long term, those are good schools that have in the league because if you have that many kids enrolled, you're going to have a lot of graduates. What do graduates become? They become alumni. What do alumni become? They become donors in a lot of cases. They're the ones who are buying tickets. They're the ones donating money. They're the ones buying the merch. That's why I think 10, 20 years down the road, UCF could be an extremely dangerous program and could compete at a very high level because of the number of students they have. Now, Arizona State has always been in that situation. They've not been able to take advantage of it. But if they can if Kenny Dillingham and them figure it out, and really tap into being in that Phoenix market and taking advantage of that high enrollment number, they could be dangerous too. Let's see. Thank you, Clint, for the comment, man. Compliment, rather. Daniel says the schedule comes out 11 a.m. tomorrow. Absolutely. I will be on the road traveling for work, but I'm hoping to do a show on it sometime tomorrow afternoon or evening. Tosh, Coach Roth's, talked earlier about adding. He's going to add a lot more speed, so that alone should help the defense. Jeremy Armourtrout says WVU needs to invest with fans and build a pepperoni roll company and sell them worldwide. It's a win-win. I love the idea, Jeremy. I love it. Well, listen, I want to give a real quick one more time. I want to remind you about BetUS Online. Right now, they offer a casino. BetUS.com/casino. You get a 200% sign-up bonus on your very first deposit at BetUS.com/casino, where you can play dealer games, you can play online slots, any of that you're into. So BetUS is more than just online betting. They also have an online casino. Check them out today. Also want to thank Cat Scanner, Stone Street, and Buckner for their support of the show. They're your personal injury and medical malpractice attorneys in the state of West Virginia. They're also licensed in Virginia. So if you need an attorney for either of those matters, please give them a call at 304-999-HURT or go to yourlawyeryourvoice.com. One more quick announcement, too. I say quick. One announcement. A website. I got a new website on the way. So be on the lookout for that. Hopefully it'll be here by the 1st of March. I'm excited about it. It's going to hopefully be much more professionally done. I built the last website myself. So, and I had no idea what I was doing. So it didn't turn out great. I mean, it was functional and it served its purpose. But I got one coming that I've got some folks doing for me behind the scenes. People who do this and know what they're doing. They're professionals at it. So I'll be talking about that more later, but I am excited about that. We'll get the blog content back up. It'll be wvsportschat.com. Couz'sCorner.com will also still get you to where you need to go. I still own that domain as well. So, again, wvsportschat.com is on the way. Couz'sCorner.com will still work once I get it all finalized. Right now, neither of those sites are working. Do have the domains up, but just waiting on the sites to get built, and we'll be rolling. You'll be able to access my videos, my podcasts. I'm hoping to have a link to my merch store. I'm hoping to have a link to my, ONIT athlete trading cards like I did before. There will be blog posts up, the whole 9 yards. I'm hoping to do a much better job, be more consistent with the written content once I get the site up and going. So be on the lookout for wvsportschat.com, which will be part of the Couz's Corner, family. John Waffle, H2P, drops a $4.99 super chat. Thank you, John, for the donation. Hope it's something I want to read. He says ACC will take KU and Arizona, and the Big 12 will be more irrelevant. Okay, if you say so. We'll see. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. I don't see either team unless the ACC figures out a way. If they can get listen, I'm not saying it's out of the equation that ACC could potentially eventually take Big 12 schools down the road, but here's what's going to happen. Clemson and Florida State lawsuit has to get behind them. Number one, they have to get that done, and there's rumors that could be settled here soon. If that happens, they get that behind them. Everybody's hunky dory in the league. They have some things calm down, things settle down, and everybody's happy. And all of a sudden, they're making a lot more money. Then maybe the ACC would look more attractive. But right now, I'm not sure why the ACC would be more attractive than the Big 12. I mean, they're making a little bit more money right now, but again, like I mentioned earlier in the show, that contract goes to 2036, and they're making incrementally a little bit more money every year. Well, the Big 12 can renegotiate an entirely new contract in 2031 that will include the 4 new members they just added, so that weren't included in the last contract. So the Big 12, in my opinion, long term, has a chance to increase their value much more than the ACC. That being said, that's all based on what's going to happen 5-6 years from now. A lot can happen between then. If the ACC figures out a way to stabilize, if they can keep Florida State and Clemson in the fold, keep UNC in the fold, and they increase their value somehow, then maybe a Big 12 team looks at that conference and goes, you know what, that's where I want to be. It's possible, John. I'm not saying it's impossible. I just don't see it. A lot of things would have to fall into place for the ACC that are not there today for me to believe that that's going to happen. But no West Virginia. He hates West Virginia. He's never going to say anything nice about West Virginia, John. John Dry, you can forget that. John Waffle's not going to say anything nice about WVU. Pirate Mitch says, I've got a feeling WVU and ECU will be playing each other as conference goes in the 2030s. What conference? We will see. Pirate Mitch, no offense, because I have good friends that went to ECU, coworkers, great people. I have a lot of respect for ECU. I actually think they're disrespected a lot in all the conference realignment talk, to be honest with you. Not sure why they don't get mentioned more. But that would be a bad thing for West Virginia because that means they have been relegated to a G5 or G6 conference. And I'm truly, truly hoping that don't happen. Not saying it won't or can't. I don't think it will. Ram Baker seems to be doing everything he can to prevent that from happening. But in 5-6 years, who the heck knows, man? It's very possible. But listen. All right, guys, listen, I'm going to jump off of here. I've been on an hour and 15 minutes. What a great show. I really enjoyed it. It flew by. Didn't feel like an hour and 15 minutes. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to like the video here, whether you're watching it live or on the replay. Don't forget to share. Don't forget to leave a comment. Even if you're watching on the replay, the comments still help. Don't forget to check out my basketball channel, Hoops from the Hills, where I cover West Virginia basketball all season long. I just dropped my Cincinnati post-game reaction, or I say post-game, my Cincinnati reaction a day later over on that show, on that channel. So go check that out, please. We'll be covering that, the rest of the season and throughout the postseason as well, and maybe even small season stuff. But so go support that channel, please, if you don't mind. Again, keep your eyes open for the website. Don't forget, I am still an affiliate marketer for ONIT Athlete Trading Cards. If you want trading cards of your favorite college football player, college basketball player, look, they have volleyball, they have other sports there as well. Go to ONIT, go to the link in the description box. It'll be there here in a little bit for ONIT Athlete Trading Cards. Click the link. If you buy anything while on there after using that link, I'll get a small commission, and your favorite athletes will get NIL money from the deal, and you'll get yourself some really cool trading cards. So in the meantime, I really appreciate you tuning in. One more shout out to my sponsors, BetUS Online and Cats Counter, Stone Street, and Buckner Attorneys at Law. Thank them for helping keep the lights on. Thank all of you for helping keep the lights on as well. I hope the rest of your day and or night is top shelf. Q, country, roads, and stay blessed.